Nigel, you have worked as a consultant in the tourism and hospitality industry in Canada for 6 years, and you were also involved in a few consulting projects in the UK. Why did you first become interested in a consulting career?
I was interested in consulting because I think it's an attractive career. It appealed to me because I like listening to people. I like gathering data and trying to make sense of people's views and trying to understand the big picture. And I think I still have those kind of attributes today. I like collecting primary data and listening to people and trying to figure out solutions and problems. So I think that's probably why I was always attracted to the consulting sector. After I did my first undergraduate degree, I just like collecting primary data, making sense of it, and then trying to offer solutions to people. So I think that was probably the biggest thing that really appealed to me. And I've always been attracted to the tourism sector too, because I sort of studied that as part of my undergraduate degree, and I knew there were jobs in that sector, and I really liked the idea of trying to work in tourism consultancy.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a great job. Were there actually things that you particularly liked, and were there other things that you didn't like at all?
Yes, I think consulting is not for everyone. And let's start off with some of the negative things. Let's talk about the long hours. A lot of times you are not just working, a 9 to 5 job. There are times when a new proposal will come in. You're working on a real project that pays money, and then you have to drop everything to try to win new jobs. Because remember, consultancy is not just about current jobs. You're always trying to win future jobs. On future jobs, you want to think about bringing in money to the business over the next year or even 2 years or 3 years. So you have to drop everything to try to win new jobs. And that means you have a big balancing act about current jobs that are paying your salary versus trying to win future work. And of course, when you put money in, you're trying to put effort in to try to win new jobs. You're not being paid for that. Clients aren't paying you to put in a tender or respond to one. So this is really kind of a lost leader. You might put in 2 days working on a new proposal and your company doesn't get that. So that adds a lot of pressure for consultants because you have to devote a certain percentage of your time trying to win new jobs while trying to balance your current paying consultancy jobs, which have deadlines. And there is a lot of stress attached to being a consultant. Not just including putting everything aside to try to win new jobs and tenders, is you're trying to balance maybe working on 3 or 4 projects at the same time, and they might have some deadlines all coming up. So that means you do have long hours. It does mean sometimes you will be, as we like to say, burning the midnight oil, where you are working till 2 or 3. My consulting career, sometimes I did all-nighters, and everybody was pulling together. You're working until 6 or 7 o'clock that next morning because you've got to get that tender or that deadline out by 11 o'clock in the morning. And when something's due by 11 o'clock to a client, it means by 11. It doesn't mean 10 after 11. If you miss that deadline, your company won't be considered, or there might be some penalty attached to it. So quite a few times long hours, and there's the expression, besides burning the midnight oil, darkest before dawn. At 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, that is when you're really, really tired, lots of coffee. So I think teamwork and camaraderie is really important there, and everybody's got to pull their weight. So those are some of the negative things, those long hours, stress of trying to balance a number of projects at the same time. But on the plus side, as a consultant, there's nothing bigger than a buzz of completing a feasibility study for a new tourist attraction or a community center in a community, and then you provide those recommendations that should be built, and then 2 years later you actually drive down the road and you see it built. And you think, wow, that was me who worked on that project. So those are some things that I really liked. I think something that I really liked that I learned about consulting that I didn't think of when I first came to the sector, even though I said I like listening to people and understanding the bigger picture, what I really learned about is I enjoyed the process. And this is where I really became quite skilled at research methods, learning how to do quantitative and or qualitative research. I had a wonderful mentor in my consulting company who taught me a lot about the good strategies you needed to use when you go into a community or you work with a client to understand what that community feels, going out and doing representative samples of surveys of community attitudes towards tourism services or leisure attractions, or going out and doing qualitative workshops and focus groups with a client, or special interest groups, speaking to seniors or youth groups or disabled groups in communities and finding out what they wanted. So I really learned that yes, it is exciting to come up with the end product and the recommendations that built that leisure center or that tourist attraction. But what I also learned is a lot of enjoyment about understanding the research data collection process, that you become highly skilled. And once you become skilled at gathering data on a lot of projects, you gain a lot of skills for future work, and you become a really good consultant because you sort of know what to do, and you can always apply your earlier learned knowledge and the methods you learned to replicate future work. So I'm not saying that it's a shortcut to the research process, because every community, every job should be treated as unique, but you build up quite a good repertoire of the best way to approach things. And I really enjoyed that aspect, that, oh, it's about the process, the journey of consultancy right from the start to the finish is what makes it exciting. It's not necessarily coming up with the final recommendation. It's that starting from the beginning, listening, going out, collecting that data, and really becoming knowledgeable about what is the best management solution for the client. I really enjoyed that.
So what you just said, I think, has a lot to do with success as a consultant. And that brings me to the question, of course, what are the key skills that are required to be a good consultant?
Okay, I think I've touched upon some of those skills. I think you really have to know your research methods. What is the best way to go out into communities, into countries, destinations, whether it's quantitative or qualitative approaches? What's the best way to gather the data that you need to really understand what are some of the key tourism issues in this community amongst local residents or visitors or people who go to events or festivals, the organizers, everybody? What is the most appropriate solution to get that data? And you become quite skilled at going to a town hall meeting or doing a focus group or designing questionnaires and analyzing it and coming up with the best way to gather that. Because remember, data is knowledge, and knowledge is power in the consulting sector. And if you are confident that you've collected the key issues in any community or any country or working with a client, that just really makes you confident. So I really learned about my research method skills. I think what's really important too is listening skills. You got to make sure you're listening to what the community or the client is asking you. Don't lead the research. Your job as a consultant is going in and listening to people, finding out what their key issues are and making sense of that so you can come back to the bigger picture and make the most appropriate recommendations or strategic suggestions for people. So I think listening skills is really important. Definitely you need communication skills. You have to win jobs from potential clients, whether that client is a private company, a tourism investor, developer, somebody who wants to run a tourist attraction, or it's a government. How to, improve the marketing of a destination or provide us a tourism master plan. You've got to go out and win that job. So you've got to put together the proposal, and sometimes clients will award jobs just on the written proposal, but mostly they want you to come in and dazzle them with a presentation too. They want to ask you some questions. So I really learned about communication and my public speaking skills. I really got very confident because after more and more doing those kind of interviews to be selected to be the potential client, you've got to really know how to sell yourself. So I really enjoyed the public speaking, and then going out as part of the data collection methods, going out into a community and speaking with 100 people in a big community hall or some type of public meeting. And sometimes uncomfortable, you get asked tough questions. Sometimes local residents or investors may not like some of your answers, so you really learned about how to handle those situations. So a lot of times you learn how to duck from the rotten tomatoes being thrown at you, but I really enjoyed getting that kind of skill development as well. So I think there's a whole bunch of skills. Obviously, your, those kind of analytical skills in terms of quantitative data, what are the best ways to analyze your data too. You've got to have good writing skills too. You might have collected tons of data and you've got to synthesize that into a report for a client or some type of executive summary. So you've got to be able to make sense of all this data and write succinctly as well what is it the client wants to hear. So I think there's a whole range of skills that makes an effective consultant.
Now, when you look at the tourism industry today, do you think that there are any trends that have a particular effect on consultancy in this field?
Yeah, there's a number of trends. I mean, you're always going to have your classic tourism master plans and feasibility studies. So communities, destinations will always want the classic master plan. Take us through the next 5 or 10 years. What do we need to develop our tourism in this country, this region, this city, or even in this town? And how do we develop that? There will always be a need for studies, feasibility studies for a new tourist attraction, a new museum, a new theme park, a new tourist attraction in some communities. So you're always going to have those types of studies always being done. But I think there are some other key trends in the sector. One of them would be green issues, the environment, sustainability. How do tourist attractions or destinations become much more green, environmentally aware? So lots of companies or clients are looking for ways to improve the bottom line in terms of their environmental waste, so waste management, or making them green, more sustainable. So that's one key trend. A lot of tourism companies will be interested in CSR, corporate social responsibility too. That's a big growth area for tourism companies. A lot of clients are much more interested too in how they can best promote their attraction or their destination through social media. So there will be special clients looking at giving advice on how to best market destinations. Of course, some bigger destinations will have their own in-house marketing teams. They may be aware of that, but it's those smaller communities or the smaller tourist attractions, sometimes they struggle on how best to promote that. So we need to bring in outside experts because some attractions or operations, they don't have those skill sets. And of course, things are changing so quickly. How do you respond to competition? If you think you're a tourist attraction, you're competing against all the other tourist attractions, but you're competing against people in-house leisure entertainment people. How do you get them out of the house? So it's a very competitive world. You're competing for people's leisure time, and it's tough. So a lot of competition analysis on how to get tourists to your place of business is really important too.
Okay. Now, imagine a person that's just finished their bachelor's or maybe master's degree in tourism management. Maybe they have 1 or 2 years experience in the industry, and tomorrow is their first day on the job as a consultant. In one sentence, what would be your recommendation for them?
In one sentence? That's going to take more than one sentence. So I think just be aware that you got to work your way up through the sector. When I started in consultancy, I was down as the kind of grunt worker collecting data, going out, and it takes a while to build up that kind of experience and capital to get into the more senior positions. But even on the entry level kind of research position at a consulting company, you start learning so much and you just gather the skills, and very quickly you gather that knowledge because you're working on a number of projects, and next thing, over a year or two, next thing you know, you've worked on 30 or 40 projects and you really have become part of a team member. So enjoy any position in the consulting sector because it is exciting and there's wonderful opportunities to move up quite quickly in the sector as well, and you certainly gather your knowledge very quickly because it's a huge learning curve as well. So I would say, don't try to think you're going to go into a top management position. You got to really acquire those skills as you go into that sector.
Okay. Nigel, thank you very much for talking to us today. Thanks.
You're welcome.